The Chargers are taking a big swing hiring defensive coordinator Chris O'Leary. Could he be the next Jesse Minter?
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Droegemeier, and we've been covering the Chargers now for 10 seasons, but this is our 8th year as the host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day as part of the #1 sports podcast network. David, what do we got today?
We know the Chargers were looking for their next defensive coordinator, but I am in total shock that they landed on Chris O'Leary. So we got to talk about that. One thing we do know is that the players, they love it. They can't wait to get started. And Mike McDaniel has made his first official hire. And of course, it is the new offensive line coach, Butch Barry.
Yeah, and I think I really like that move too. But the first of those moves with Chris O'Leary, definitely a surprise. But Crossover Thursday is presented by Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. David, we know the formula. Say you're going to do a buy or sell show. Say you're going to do a fan show. And major news will break. At one point last night, I said I think the only thing that would stop us from buy or sell Thursday at that point would be if they hired their new defensive coordinator. And they did. And it was kind of out of left field a little bit. Maybe we weren't reading the tea leaves close enough, but this one definitely surprised me, especially when the day started with them going and interviewing one of the hottest names on the defensive coordinator market in Jim Leonhard from the Broncos. And then they end up going with a familiar face in Chris O'Leary. This is something that surprised me for sure, but the more kind of I read into it and think about it, the more I think I'm starting to like it.
Yeah, I definitely was completely caught off guard. I did not think that this was a possibility at all. And of course, you know, I mean, when I saw that they interviewed him, I was like, okay, yeah, I remember him. You know, I know he did some good things with the Chargers, but it just seemed like there were a lot of other names that, you know, were at the forefront of our minds. You know, obviously you mentioned Jim Leonhard, Steve Clinkscale, another one where I thought, okay, maybe that's where they would go to try to keep the continuity, but that's not what it was at all. And now we sit here with Chris O'Leary being one of the youngest defensive coordinators in the National Football League at 34 years old.
It's crazy. I mean, you know, to see this happen in the way it did, because, yeah, I mean, I can't blame you for not thinking, you know, the leader in the clubhouse was actually the Western Michigan University defensive coordinator. Wasn't on the bingo card initially, right? We thought if they wanted to keep it as close to Minter as possible, there were other candidates internally, and we'll talk about what this means for those guys. But you have to be impressed with what Chris O'Leary was able to do. I mean, not only with the Chargers in 2024, where he spent 1 year there under Jesse Minter, their former defensive coordinator, also had a year under him at Georgia State back in 2015, but he left the Chargers to go pick up some very valuable experience. He went to go be the defensive coordinator, even though it was for a collegiate team. And he was really, really successful there, which is why I think leads to this excitement. There's a post from Sebastian on Twitter where Western Michigan went from 107th in the country in scoring per game allowed to 9th in scoring. They went from 412 yards per game allowed in 2024, which was 109th, to 305 yards per game in 2025. They went from 109th to 14th place. They lowered it by over 100 yards.
Wild.
Game. Yeah. They went from 94th in passing yards allowed to 8th in the entire country in passing yards allowed. So, like, you couldn't be more impressed by what he was able to do there. At the same time, like, this is one of the youngest coordinators in the league now, and a pretty risky move, taking someone that only has 1 season of college defensive coordinator experience under his belt and only 1 year of NFL experience under his belt. So he must have blown the Chargers away with his interview for sure, right? But it does feel like, hey, this is one of the ways, if you're losing Jesse Minter, to try to keep that continuity, because we know what's in place works right now, David, and they thought this is the play caller that can help us keep that continuity and have the play calling experience to keep these things going.
Yeah, I mean, definitely didn't expect it, but as we start to pick up all the information and try to, connect these dots, it makes a lot of sense. And, we've seen this scheme with what Jesse Minter and Mike McDonald are running. It's been very successful, both in the college ranks and in the pro ranks. And I think Chris O'Leary just proved it again, where he took mostly that same scheme to Western Michigan and completely overhauled and transformed that entire system dramatically. Like, it wasn't even close. Like, in 1 year, like, that is a historic turnaround. But I think it's just more proof, more evidence that this scheme here that they're running, it works.
It absolutely does. And this is the other thing, right? Like, you already know, and you have been adding players that work in this scheme, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like, this isn't something where you feel like you have to go get a bunch of different players now to fit in what Chris O'Leary is going to be bringing to the table now. So I think that's a big part of it. And I think the other thing is like, when Jim Harbaugh's last two defensive coordinator hires are Jesse Minter at Michigan and then bringing him with him to the Chargers, and then Mike McDonald at Michigan the year before that, yeah, you're going to earn a little bit of trust, right? Like, I have faith that they obviously see something in him, because like, losing Jesse Minter is brutal, because like, he was awesome, undeniably. But this feels like an attempt to keep things as close to what they had as possible, which as soon as Jesse Minter left, and even before that, when we knew he was going to leave, it felt like, yeah, like, you could go outside, you could hire someone who runs something completely different and just go for the best guy. But it feels like you should try to keep what you have here, because it not only has it been great, but it's been growing, right? Like, and these guys now will be going into kind of year 3 of something similar to what they've been in, as opposed to year 1 in a brand new defense and having the growing pains that come along with that. Now, we don't know if this guy is as special as Jesse Minter calling plays or Mike McDonald calling plays, but there are theories out there, David, right? Whether or not this is something that might have been in the works since last year. Was this a succession plan? Could this have been the plan all along? Because, man, like, you start connecting some of the dots here. He randomly leaves to become a college defensive coordinator after a super successful year at the NFL level, and you're kind of head scratching, but he got some valuable play calling experience. He did it. He was super successful, and now he put himself right in position to be the Chargers defensive coordinator in 2026.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's just way too much smoke here for this there not to be fire when it comes to this particular situation. And the Chargers told you, like, Jim Harbaugh told you, we know Jesse Minter is going to be a head coach. Like, it's not a question of if, it's just when. And they were preparing for it. They told you that they were preparing for it. So this very well could have been the plan all along. I mean, it is definitely not far-fetched to put those things together. It makes a lot of sense. And, I saw some tweets out there that say, like, this is something that's pretty typical. Obviously, we've seen it with Mike McDonald, Jesse Minter, but they like to send coordinators to college, get some experience to call plays. I think Ted Wynn, I believe I saw him put that out there, that said that Coach Harbaugh likes to do that, likes to send him to the college ranks, get some experience, and then bring him back to the NFL. And here he is now as the defensive coordinator of the Chargers with that very plan in mind. And I think one of the things that people, I guess, forget to remember is Coach Harbaugh is a master at assembling a staff and putting a staff together. Yeah. He's almost a kingmaker in that fashion, where he just knows it's not just about being able to find ideal and top end player talent, which obviously you need, no question about it, but it's also about filling your staff with the absolute best, brightest, up and coming minds, and just the brightest minds in football. And I think this is another attempt to try to find someone who is in that same mold as a Jesse Minter and Mike McDonald, a young and up and coming coach.
And something we've talked about, right? Maybe someone that could stick around a little bit if it's successful, who probably won't get a head coaching job next year, even if the Chargers continue to be good on defense, right? Might be able to have this homegrown
for
talent,
a few years, hopefully.
Well, that's the thing. Like, Jesse Minter worked with the Ravens, right? Left the Ravens to become the Michigan defensive coordinator, ended up coming back to the Chargers, right? And moving up in that way. Mike McDonald was with the Ravens, went to Michigan, became their defensive coordinator for a year, went back to the Baltimore Ravens and became their defensive coordinator. Now, this one is expedited, right? This one, they put a rush on it. Jesse Minter was the defensive coordinator also at Georgia State right before that. Like, Mike McDonald had several years in the NFL before trying to make the move. But, like, for someone like a Chris O'Leary, if you're an up-and-coming guy, how else do you get that play calling experience? Like, you're either going to get it for the first time with someone taking a chance on you at the NFL level, or you can go to the college level, get that very valuable experience that you can't get at the next level. Like, it's almost like a minor league, right? Where like, we'll set him down to AAA so we can start, keep getting at bats, right? And then we'll bring him back up to the big leagues. It feels like that's what happened here. And it's honestly really exciting. But how will this impact the other coaches internally the Chargers ended up interviewing for this job? Because it could have an adverse effect. Maybe they go leave with Jesse Minter. And also, there's one thing's for sure, the players love it. So we're getting into that and more in today's Locked On Chargers podcast. Let's be real. Managing your finances can feel overwhelming between subscriptions you forgot about, bills that keep going up, and trying to figure out where all your money actually goes each month. It's easy to feel like you're losing control. And who has the time to track every transaction or hunt down hidden fees? That's where Rocket Money comes in. The personal finance app that helps you take control. It finds and cancels your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. I was shocked when Rocket Money showed me I was paying for one specific subscription, a streaming service twice. Me and my wife were both paying for it, which was just terrible to find out, but super thankful that Rocket Money showed me that. But also, you can set budgets and goals, get personalized insights, and receive real-time alerts for large transactions, upcoming bills, and low balances. Let Rocket Money help you reach your financial goals faster. Join at rocketmoney.com/lockedon. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. rocketmoney.com/lockedon. Tax season doesn't have to take over your life. This year, TurboTax is making it easier than ever to just hand things off and move on with your day. With TurboTax full service, you can have your taxes done for you by a trusted local expert, start to finish, without the stress or the guesswork. Instead of spending hours trying to figure out forms, you can meet with a local TurboTax expert in person or connect online, and they'll handle everything from W-2s to self-employed forms and work to get you every deduction. You can upload your documents, go about your day, and get updates right in the TurboTax app. It's a huge time saver and gives real peace of mind knowing an expert is handling it. Plus, for a limited time, you can have your taxes done by a local TurboTax expert for just $150 all in. If a TurboTax expert didn't file for you last year, just file by February 28th. Take taxes off your plate and get back to your life. Visit turbotax.com/local to book your appointment today. All right, David, well, now it's time to get into the next part of this here, which is what happens with all the guys we thought kind of had an inside track at this job, because the Chargers did interview 3 internal candidates for this, right? They interviewed the one guy we thought would be the leader in the clubhouse, who was the co-defensive coordinator with Jesse Minter in their last year at Michigan together, Steve Clinkscale, who, like Chris O'Leary, who gets a lot of credit for what he was able to do, with the defensive backs he worked with, like Derwin James, and we'll talk about Elijah Molden's story there. But so does Steve Clinkscale, who's done a great job with the cornerbacks as well. Experienced, more of a veteran coach, but doesn't have necessarily the recent play calling experience that someone like a Chris O'Leary has now with what he did last season. But also, Dylan Roney, who interviewed for the job as well, your outside linebackers coach. Adam Fuller, the guy who took Chris O'Leary's job when he left, ended up taking the safeties coach. He gets an interview. Mike Elston never got an interview, which is still surprising to me. But I think the ramifications of this and where it goes now is just kind of like, does this make any of these guys kind of salty or bitter and make them more likely to move on to greener pastures, potentially even following Jesse Minter to Baltimore?
Yeah, I think that's definitely a part of the equation that you have to look at for sure. And we all know that, when they're building staffs in the NFL, relationships are a huge part of it. And so, there's some familiarity there. I mean, a lot of these coaches have been with the Chargers for the last couple of years on the defensive side specifically. So they should be familiar with Chris O'Leary. They have, coached with him, so they know him. I think obviously all of these guys, they all want to be at the mecca, right, of the coaching profession, which is being a head coach. But there's a succession plan that's kind of in place there. So yeah, I can understand why maybe a couple of these guys that felt like their next stop in that succession plan for themselves was to be the defensive coordinator. And so I think the guy that I'm most, afraid of losing here is Steve Clinkscale, just because, I was okay with him taking over. It felt like that would be a coach that would be able to ensure the continuity here, and to be able, to try to keep things as similar as possible. But Jesse Minter just got hired. Jesse's going to call plays. I think he's already said as much, that he's going to call the defense, but that doesn't mean that, Steve Clinkscale won't get that opportunity to be that defensive coordinator and work with him, which is something he's already done before, building that defense and helping coach that defense. Obviously, there's a lot of overlap with, what, Coach Orr was doing last year, because it's all pretty much the same system. But that's the name I think I'm most afraid of losing.
Yeah, because Jesse Minter hasn't brought in his own defensive coordinator yet. And I mean, at least, per the reports, haven't seen the Ravens request to interview any of the Chargers defensive staff yet. I mean, the one guy we know they're losing is Navarro Bowman, so they'll still have to figure out how to replace him. But I do wonder kind of the ramifications we see by this, because Steve Clinkscale is the guy that I would look at, because being why would he think he's going to get the job if Chris O'Leary leaves, right? Or even gets fired? Why would he think that, right? Because you already kind of passed up on him once. It's better to be a defensive coordinator under a defensive coach than continuing to be just a defensive backs coach, which Jesse Minter has hired in Baltimore. But the flip side of this is, man, if you can keep these other guys, this might be a coup, because the one thing we know is that the guys that they have in place are very, very good at what they do, right? Whether it's Steve Clinkscale with the defensive backs, or Dylan Roney with the edge rushers, or Mike Elston of the interior defensive line guys. Like, all of those guys have been really, really good at their craft so far. Now you might be able to keep them in place. If you hire a Jim Leonard, I think that's far from certain, right? Like, that you're keeping. Like, I think there's much more uprooting and upheaval in this unit and this coaching staff if you end up doing that. Now you have the chance where, O'Leary did spend time in Notre Dame with the defensive line coach Mike Elston and also Dylan Roney. He does have time with basically everyone except for Adam Fuller, because he replaced him last year. If you can keep all these guys, now that feels like a major win.
Oh, it's a massive win because of the continuity that you'll be able to keep on that side of the ball, which, losing a defensive coordinator, it is far from a certainty that you'll be able to have that much continuity, because if you bring somebody from the outside, they're going to want to bring in their people. I mean, it's just something that we see all the time to help them try to, teach what they want. But this move, people are already, running this defense. The players have been selected for this defense. Like, they are, like you mentioned earlier, they're kind of building and growing in this. And it feels very intentional from the moves they made on the outside from free agency and in the draft. Like, they're drafting players to play in this particular system. So you get continuity from a player perspective. You get continuity from a coaching perspective. While you're losing a coordinator, I think that would be the most ideal situation possible.
Especially because you already lost your offense coordinator, right, or fired him, and have a brand new one coming to town. But if there's one thing that we know for sure so far, David, and one kind of huge vote of confidence for us, and I'm sure, for this defense going forward, is the support that this guy, even with one season under his belt with this team, has from the players. Because, man, they seem pretty juiced up about this hiring.
Oh my goodness. Tony Jefferson is raving about Chris O'Leary. And said in multiple interviews, like, this guy's going to be a head coach in very, very short order. Very excited about it. Deion Henley posted that he's really excited about it. Derwin James said, let's go in a tweet. Elijah Molden was extremely excited about it, which I definitely understand, because he was really instrumental early on in really building that foundation and learning the system, because I'm sure if people remember, he got traded for right before the season started.
In 2024. And Daniel Popper had a good article about this and said that basically for 2.5 hours a day, once Elijah Molden got into town, it was just them two going at it and installing this scheme, and said basically that in 3 days, Chris O'Leary was able to get Elijah Molden up to speed, and then he ends up having an interception in week 2 and ends up, I think, tying the Chargers in interceptions in 2024. He might have even taken a little step back in 2025. Maybe he gets back to returns to form a little bit under Chris O'Leary. But yeah, he said, yes, sir, ski. Let's get to work, CO. Tarheeb still. Bing bong. But this is what Tony Jefferson had to say when Chris O'Leary left. And this was after one season with him. And Tony Jefferson played much more in 2025 than in 2024. He said, one of the best coaches I've ever had. He's going to be very successful. One of the more brilliant football minds I've been around. Congrats, CO. Western Michigan. You guys got a dog. And now the Chargers got a dog. But Hopper also had a great story in there just about how instrumental and kind of hands-on he was with getting Derwin James back to his all-pro form and really walking him through it day by day in that new nickel position that he was playing more of last year. So, the players love it. It doesn't mean everything, right? But, The fact that they're celebrating this when they know Steve Clinkscale was up for the job and they know some of these other internal candidates like Adam Fuller, who's Elijah Molden and Tony Jefferson's current safety coach, didn't get the job. I think that tells you something, right? And I'm not meaning as an indictment on Adam Fuller.
No.
I think it's more of just a commending of this
vote of
move
confidence
and
for
a
Chris
support.
O'Leary.
Yeah, also, what do you want? You want him to maximize the players, right? Like, that's what you would have missed so much with Jesse Minter.
Yeah.
This guy showed you that, right? With Elijah Molden, with Tony Jefferson, with Derwin James. You pick up Marcus May mid-season, right? You get him so up to speed, he gets an interception in his first game.
Yeah.
Tony Jefferson's able to come back and make an impact immediately. All of those things happened under Chris O'Leary, and these guys seem to be very stoked that he's going to be the guy taking over for Jesse Minter, who they all loved, right? Like, they loved Jesse Minter.
Universally.
And they're stoked on the guy they have now. But that wasn't the only hiring, because the Chargers made another huge hiring, bringing in a new offensive line coach, someone that Mike McDaniels is very, very familiar with. Butch Barry is the new guy for their offensive line coach. We're getting into all that and more in today's Locked On Chargers podcast. If you've ever hired someone who looked good on paper but wasn't the right fit, you know how important that is. When you want candidates who truly match what you're looking for, trust Indeed sponsored jobs. Hiring? Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed sponsored jobs put your post at the top of the page and help you reach the right candidates faster. Just filling a job isn't everything. If you fill the job and then it's not a right fit and you have to fire someone, a couple of weeks later, now you're right back in the spot that you were before. Finding the right fit is huge, and making sure it's seen is even bigger. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed are 90% more likely to report a hire than non-sponsored jobs, and the sponsored jobs boost your post to people who are the best match for your role, and that makes a real difference. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help give your job the premium placement it deserves at Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL. Just go to Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL right now and support the show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Do it the right way with Indeed. I also need to tell you guys that there's nothing like being in an NBA arena. The crowd, the energy, the moment. Getting tickets, though, that part hasn't always been so simple. That's why Gametime has become the go-to app for scoring tickets fast without the hassle. It puts the advantage back where it belongs, with the fans. I also am always looking at Gametime just to see what's going on around me. But what I love about it is being able to see the view from the seat that you're buying, which makes checking out so much easier, especially when you know that you're seeing the all-in price up front, so you don't get any of those surprises at checkout. And it's also great with last-minute options, too. Usually the price goes down the closer it gets to tip-off. And right now you can get into the next Lakers home game against the 76ers for as low as $100. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. That's code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. And remember, it's gametime.co, not .com. David, this is the segment that was supposed to lead the show today. And that was, even before that, supposed to be a buy or sell show today. But that just shows you the craziness of these last couple of weeks and what I think have been a really strong start to the Chargers offseason. Not just replacing someone who needed to be replaced on the offensive coordinator side, but also being able to fill in a huge hole that Jesse Minter left when he left for Baltimore. But the Chargers made the first Mike McDaniel hiring, and I wonder if he was instrumental in this hiring. It's his old friend. The Chargers have hired offensive line coach Butch Barry, who has spent the last 3 years with the Miami Dolphins as Mike McDaniel's offensive line coach. And this is something that, maybe we were holding out for a Frank Smith at one point, but David, now looking at it this way and seeing kind of the connections here, there's no surprise that he ended up going with someone he knows really well.
No, not at all. I mean, as I talked about just earlier, when coaches are building staffs, relationships are incredibly important. You're often going to find them staffed with guys that they have, been with at other stops. And that's exactly what happened here. In 2021, when, Mike McDaniel was the offensive coordinator of the San Francisco 49ers, Butch Barry was the assistant offensive line coach along with him on that same staff. In 2022, he went on to be the offensive line coach for Nathaniel Hackett. That did not really end up very well. Obviously,
I don't put that on
fired,
you, Coach.
before the end of that season. That was a huge disaster. But after that, he then found himself back in Miami with Mike McDaniel for the last 3 seasons. So he's been there. Obviously, the continuity has been there. And, what he's been able to do there in Miami with that very young offensive line, I think, is reasons why you should be very excited about what Butch Barry brings to the table.
Yeah, he had a lot of experience, and like even with Mike Devlin, like when he came in, you knew he had a lot of experience. Who's the offensive line coach that was fired after the season, along with Greg Roman, but there wasn't a lot of like huge success. You're basically saying, well, he's done it a lot, right? Which might be the Greg Roman argument for it. But now I think the nice thing is you look at someone, this was the report from Cameron Wolf from the NFL.com. He said, Chargers hiring Butch Barry as their offensive line coach. Per source, Barry has been the Dolphins O-line coach under Mike McDaniel for the last 3 years, maximizing their room. And that's the last part that's important. And this is from Alex Ensdorf, who put, the Dolphins were 30th in offensive line spending in 2025 and ended up 3rd in yards per rush, 9th in EPA per rush, and 12th in yards per game. And that was with and without, Tua and also Quinn Ewers. So I think the biggest individual improvement I found was Aaron Brewer, who is like a decent player in his first 4 years with Tennessee, but in the last 2 years with the Dolphins and Butch Barry, he has been incredible. I mean, in 2022 and 2023, he allowed 70 pressures and 10 sacks and 1,184 pass blocking snaps. In 2024 and 2025, he had more pass blocking snaps, 1,263, and only allowed 26 pressures and 3 sacks over those next 2 years. 7 less sacks, right? That is insane. I mean, we're talking about also, 46 less pressures than he gave up before, or 44 less pressures? Like, that's crazy. That's such an insane turnaround, and that's a big reason why Aaron Brewer ended up as the second highest graded center this season, and also the best run blocking center in football per PFF. And that's important, David, because you need to maximize who you have. And the other thing is because you're going to be under the spotlight, because you're going to be the one that has to stop Justin Herbert from getting hit 129 times in 16 games like he did last season.
Yeah, I mean, they obviously need just better from that position coach, and we just didn't see a lot of tangible improvements. And, Aaron Brewer was one of those examples for Butch Barry. I think another one for me, just on a maybe smaller scale, is Patrick Paul. In 2024, Patrick Paul only had 229 pass blocking snaps and still performed very well. Gave up 3 sacks and 15 pressures, but that also continued when those pass blocking snaps went way up in 2025. 578 pass blocking snaps, still only 4 sacks and 25 pressures allowed. So a huge increase in the snaps, and still really, really high quality play. Like, and I think that's
development. Like 2024, Patrick Paul was a rookie, right?
Yeah.
And in his second season, you're putting that together. That's pretty special.
That's fantastic. Like that's towards the top of the league type of performances there, and that's what you want. You just want a coach that's going to be able to maximize the talent that they have and be able to show examples of progress, and these are 2 very clear examples in my mind.
And let's be honest, right? Like, the Chargers looked like a poorly coached offensive line in 2025.
They did.
They had something like 30 different offensive line combinations. So I feel for that part of it, and that's just an unwinnable situation. But,
for sure,
he will also be in charge of the Chargers helping set better protections, right?
Yes.
Let's start with that. Awareness versus stunts. Better plans than the one that we've seen.
Yeah, how about eliminating free rushers?
For sure. Like, the scheme will help protecting Justin Herbert, but the Chargers need to be able to get serviceable play no matter who is out there, and just at least a cohesive unit. And I think that's something that he can bring to the table. Like, I don't want to see Justin Herbert dealing with a different kind of injury every year. That's what I'm hoping Butch Barry can bring. And, like, honestly, like, this might be the most important addition on the staff as far as trying to get these guys up to speed in the new scheme that they're going to be running offensive line-wise, because that's probably the most complex differences as opposed to wide receivers or tight ends, right? And maybe quarterback, but like the offensive line, that's 5 different dudes who are all having to learn something for the first time potentially. That's huge to be able to get that coach that has a lot of experience running this specific offense, and even more importantly, having an input in how they try to rebuild the interior of this offensive line.
Yeah, I mean, he knows what Mike McDaniel wants and expects out of his offensive linemen. So he knows, and he can teach that to the offensive linemen, and everything starts with the spine of your football team. Everything starts in the middle on the offensive line, the defensive line. If the offensive line is in a good spot and they're up to speed, they're feeling confident, and they know exactly what they're doing out there, then everybody else is going to benefit because of it. So getting somebody who can really instill that and teach that, I think, is of paramount importance. And what else is of paramount importance is making sure that Justin Herbert has the best quality protection of his NFL career, because there's no more messing around. It has to happen, and they have the weapons with the money, and they have the new offensive coordinator and the new offensive line coach all working in unison to make sure that they can provide the best protection for Justin Herbert.
Yeah, I mean, it's disgusting that we were literally having to have like the Andrew Luck conversation last year. We're like, are they going to get him so beat up and brutalized, right? And like, then you talk to Greg Roman and you're like, well, Bradley Bozeman's playing pretty good. What are we talking? You know what I'm saying? Like, there was just too much disconnect from what I was seeing on the field to what this team thought they had going on. I mean, from a front office standpoint, and Joe Ortiz saying we won 11 games, Pop, to Greg Roman kind of defending, you know, his offensive line throughout the year when it just clearly wasn't good enough and wasn't well coached enough. Like, Justin Herbert can escape a lot. You're not escaping multiple free rushers and guys just losing instantly.
He covers up a lot.
Yeah, and so now you're getting somebody 4 years in the Shanahan McDaniel coaching system, right? And that tree is obviously important, going from more of a gap power scheme to more of a wide zone team, even though like every team runs a little bit of both of those things. It's more just about the frequency. And honestly, where the Chargers ran the ball best consistently in 2025
on the outside.
On the outside, right? Like, and being able to get outside and attack the edge and be able to get guys like Amarion Hampton and Kamani Vidal in space. So I think it's important to, like, if you're going to stay inside of your tree for any of these position coaches, like maybe Andy Bischoff can be okay, right, as the tight end coach. Maybe you can get fine, you know, out of Sanjay Law, whatever. But like offensive line, I felt like you needed to get somebody who knew this system well. We thought it might be Frank Smith, and I like that just from and who knows, maybe he does come on in some capacity. Like, but this felt like where that role would be, to be the potential heir apparent to a Mike McDaniel, right? And I don't know if Butch Barry brings that part of it, but getting the offensive line right is of paramount importance, and you know you're at least getting someone that has done more with less in the past and should be getting 2 all-pro level tackles back in 2026. So a lot to be excited about, a very busy news day, but I promise you, tomorrow will be our buy or sell show. If you guys want to get your buy or sell on the show, we still have a lot already loaded. I mean, I said literally last night, right? Like the defensive coordinator hiring is the only thing. They have both coordinator spots filled, right? So like that, we will be doing a buy or sell show tomorrow. So thank you to everyone who's already contributed. We have all of those. We had a ton to use already. We thought we were going to get 2 shows out of it. But we have a lot of great ones already. If you want to get yours on the show, hit us up at Locked On LAC on Twitter, at Locked On Chargers on Instagram, and our Locked On Chargers Facebook page, as well as finding the show every day on all of those platforms, and making sure you never miss the show by subscribing or following for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcast from, you're listening. If you want an ad-free version of the audio podcast, though, you can also get that too as part of the Locked On Everydayer Club for $5 a month. You get ad-free experience audio-wise, and also you get access to our Locked On Chargers exclusive Discord. So we'll always be here for you 5 days a week, audio and video for free. If you want a little extra, we have an option for that now as well. But make sure you guys are back here tomorrow for Buy or Sell Friday. Should the Chargers get Tyler Linderbaum? Is it all in on that? I'm still in on that. So we'll be getting into all that tomorrow. But until then, guys, take it easy and go Bolts.